A young girl showed up for the interview in place of her sick mother. What the billionaire CEO did afterwards surprised everyone. Under the dim light of the early morning, Ayanna curled into herself on the torn mattress, pushed against the living room wall, her body trembling beneath an old plaid wrapper that barely kept out the chill. Her breath came shallow, her forehead burning, lips dry and cracked as she pressed her cracked phone to her ear with shaking hands. "Hello. Please, I'm really sorry," she said softly, swallowing the tight knot rising in her throat. "I'm not well. I've been sick since yesterday, and it's worse this morning. Please, I just need a reschedule. I truly want to come. I've been preparing, but I can't stand right now." There was a short silence, followed by a clipped response from the woman on the line, her voice stiff and completely detached. "We don't move interviews around, miss. If you don't show up at the designated time, your application is void. That's policy. Goodbye." The line went dead. Just like that. Ayanna didn't lower the phone at first. Her hands simply dropped to her lap, and her eyes slowly filled, warm tears slipping out before she could hold them back. Her throat tightened, but she couldn't make a sound. Her chest ached, not just from the fever, but from that familiar, suffocating kind of hopelessness. "God, please," she murmured, barely able to speak. "Don't let this be the end of it." On the other side of the room, curled on a foam cushion with peeling fabric, was her daughter, Zuri. 5 years old, small for her age, her hair in little uneven twists Ayanna had tried to do before her fever got worse. Zuri sat watching her mother in silence, those big brown eyes filled with worry far too heavy for someone so young. The room they shared was crumbling around them. Cracked walls, a broken heater that hadn't worked since winter, and a sink that never stopped leaking. There were 2 bowls on the kitchen counter with leftover noodles from the night before, untouched. In front of Ayanna, lying on the floor near the table leg, was the envelope she had spent all week protecting, her CV inside, folded neatly, corners worn from being carried in her tote bag every day. She had meant to give it everything she had, but her body said no. The fever had started the day before, and even though she had begged her supervisor for time to rest, he waved her off. She took over-the-counter meds and tried to push through it, but now she couldn't even get off the mattress. Rent was due. Mr. Feldman had come knocking again yesterday, saying he wouldn't wait past Friday, and there was no food left after tonight. Her eyes closed, breath hitching as she reached for Zuri's small hand across the room, her other hand still gripping the edge of the wrapper tight like it might keep her whole. The air in their Bronx apartment was thick with silence, the kind that follows a storm of tears. Ayanna lay curled on the mattress, her breathing shallow, lips parted slightly, her body finally giving in to the drowsiness brought on by the pills she had taken in desperation. Her cheeks were stained with the tears that had long since dried up. She wasn't crying anymore. There was simply nothing left to cry. Her hand rested limp at her side, while the room stayed still, only the slow ticking of the wall clock filling the emptiness. Zuri sat on the floor, back resting against the wall, arms wrapped around her tiny knees. She hadn't spoken in hours. Her stomach had been growling since morning, but she said nothing. The leftover noodles sat cold on the counter, untouched since last night. She had gotten used to hunger the way some kids get used to bedtime. Her eyes stayed fixed on her mother, still quiet, worn out. Slowly she stood up. She didn't make a sound. The apartment was cold, and the breeze slipping through the cracked window made her shiver. She walked over to the hook by the door and reached for her faded gray sweater. It had a tiny rip under the sleeve, but it was all she had. She pulled it on, then stepped into her worn sneakers without tying the laces properly. Her fingers reached down, picking up the brown envelope on the floor, the one her mother had guarded all week. The CV was inside. Zuri didn't know everything that was written on it, but she knew it meant something big, something that could help them move out of this place where the ceiling leaked every time it rained, and Mr. Feldman kept banging on their door about rent. She tiptoed over to her mom and knelt beside her, watching the way her chest rose and fell slowly. Carefully, she pressed her lips to her mother's forehead, then stood back up, unlocking the old door and pulling it shut behind her. The hallway outside smelled of cleaning bleach and fried onions from the neighbor's breakfast. Zuri didn't wait. She walked quickly, holding the envelope close to her chest, her sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. Outside, the wind hit her hard, but she didn't stop. The streets were already alive with morning traffic. Delivery trucks, impatient horns, people rushing to work, faces buried in phones. She knew where she was going. The address had been saved in her mother's phone, the one Ayanna had texted to her friend last night in case something happened. Zuri had seen it. She had read it over and over again. It was somewhere downtown, and she remembered the numbers on the bus her mother once pointed out. She made her way to the stop, standing there among grown-ups who didn't notice her at first. One man was busy watching YouTube videos on his phone without earphones. A woman in heels kept checking her reflection in the glass. When the bus arrived, the driver didn't ask questions. She stepped on, slid her Metro card like she had seen her mom do, and took a seat by the window, clutching the envelope tightly. She stared out at the city rolling by. The tall buildings, the food carts, the rush of people who seemed too busy to notice a small girl riding alone. Across from her, a teenager with long braids was filming a TikTok dance video in her seat, mouthing lyrics silently, oblivious to everything around. The lobby of Wellington and Meyer Corporate was starting to quiet down for the morning. The last round of interviews had wrapped up nearly an hour ago, and Clara, the receptionist, was already gathering her things, smacking her gum between chews while scrolling on her phone. She barely noticed the small figure walk through the wide double doors, envelope clutched tightly to her chest, sleeves of a worn-out gray sweater hanging over her hands. Zuri approached the desk slowly, her sneakers silent against the polished floor. She could still feel the cold from the street on her skin, but she didn't flinch. She waited. Clara didn't even look up. After a few seconds, Zuri stepped a little closer and gently tapped her leg. Clara jumped and looked down, her brows pulling together. Excuse me? What are you doing here? She asked, voice sharp, unimpressed. I'm here for the interview, Zuri said, holding up the envelope with both hands. Clara let out a dry laugh. Sweetheart, the interviews ended an hour ago. Your mom's late. That's not how it works here. But please, Zuri said quietly, eyes wide. My mom's really sick. She wanted to come. She just couldn't get up. She told me she didn't want to miss it, so I brought her papers. She really, really needs this job. Clara rolled her eyes, the gum popping between her teeth. I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Rules are rules. Late is late. Just then, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Julius Langston, CEO of Wellington and Meyer, stepped out in a sleek charcoal overcoat, checking his watch. He was flanked by two associates, heading out for a board meeting on the 5th floor. He was halfway across the lobby when his eyes landed on Clara, who was standing stiff, arms crossed, talking down to someone. It wasn't just anyone. It was a little girl. Albert paused. His steps slowed, and something in him, tired, buried under years of shutting people out, stirred. Clara, he called, voice even but firm. Is there a problem? The voice came from behind them, low, crisp, steady. Clara turned like she'd been caught mid-lie. Zuri looked up. Julius Langston. He wasn't smiling. He never smiled. But he was watching, and that alone was enough to make Clara lose her words. She tried to recover. Oh, no, sir. Just a little mix-up. The child's mother missed her interview slot. I was just explaining that it can't be rescheduled. Julius's eyes moved from Clara to Zuri, standing there quietly with the envelope in her hands. Your name? He asked, voice gentle now. Zuri, she replied, voice barely above a whisper. He stepped forward. And your mother? Ayanna Brooks. He glanced at Clara. Is she on the list? Clara gave a tight nod. She was. Final slot for the morning. He turned back to Zuri. And she sent you with this? Zuri held it out to him carefully. She couldn't walk this morning. She's really sick. But she wanted to come. She said this job meant everything. Julius looked at her, at the envelope, then back at her again. He reached out and took it. Cancel my meeting, he said without looking at Clara. Sir? Clara blinked. You heard me. He motioned toward the hall. Come with me, Zuri. She followed him silently, her feet echoing against the floor as they disappeared into the hallway, leaving Clara staring, speechless, as the rest of the office buzzed back to life. Inside the quiet conference room, Julius gestured to the chair across from him. far too big for someone so small, but Zuri climbed up carefully, her knees bent, feet swinging just above the floor. She adjusted herself without fuss, whispered, "Thank you," then folded her hands in her lap. Julius didn't open the envelope on the table. He didn't need to. Not yet. He sat back slightly, watching her, letting the silence settle. The soft hum of the building outside the glass was barely noticeable. Then with a calm voice, he said, "Tell me about your mom. What is she like?" Zuri looked down at her hands, then up at him. Her fingers moved as she talked, sometimes pressing her sleeves together, sometimes tracing the edge of the chair. "She's strong. Not big strong, but heart strong," she said. "She doesn't yell, even when things are bad. She says the world is already loud, so she tries to be kind instead. She works a lot, like really a lot, but she still has time to braid my hair, or tell me stories, or share her food if mine finishes first." Her legs swung lightly, her voice steady. "I've seen her walk to work in the rain because there was no money for bus fare. She sweeps the streets, and sometimes she gets paid, and sometimes they say next week, and she still goes back. She says you don't only do things because of money, you do it because you gave your word." Julius didn't interrupt. His eyes stayed on her. "She wants to work here," Zuri continued, "not because it's fancy. She doesn't care about that. She just wants to use her brain again. She finished high school," Zuri continued, "but she didn't finish college. She started. She wanted to. But then I came, and there was nobody to help her. No family, no one to hold me, no one to pay for things. So, she left school. She said it wasn't even a question. She chose me." Zuri gave a small smile. "And she always says she doesn't regret it, that I was the best thing that ever happened to her." Julius looked at her carefully. The envelope sat between them like a quiet witness. He leaned forward just a little and asked gently, "Why did you come here today, Zuri? Why are you doing this for her?" Zuri's eyes held his without blinking. "Because she's done everything for me," she said. "She gave up school, she gave up sleep, food, everything, so I could smile, so I could feel safe. She says a good parent makes sure their child doesn't carry their struggle. She carried it all." Her fingers curled slightly as she spoke. "And I just thought, if I could help her even just once, then I should. I know I'm small, but I know what she deserves." Julius didn't move. The silence between them felt heavy, but not cold, almost sacred. Zuri went on, her voice clear now, steady with something deeper than most children ever speak of. "I see her when the landlord knocks and she has to lie about when she'll pay. I see her pretending she's not sick, so I don't worry. She works and nobody sees her. She smiles, but sometimes I think she's tired of being invisible." Her legs kept swinging. She looked down at the folder, then back at him. "She doesn't want much," she said quietly. "She just wants a job where she can be respected, where she can think again, where she can breathe. She told me once she just wants to buy me ice cream on Saturdays without checking her wallet 5 times. Zuri looked at Julius like she was telling a secret. "That broke my heart, because I can't fix it. I wanted to, but I can't. So I came here, to try." Julius leaned back, the unopened folder still in front of him, and for once he wasn't thinking about numbers or degrees or the usual way of hiring. He was thinking about everything that isn't written on a resume. As Zuri finished speaking, Julius remained silent for a moment, his hands lightly folded together in front of him. He had listened to every word, not just with his ears, but with the part of himself that rarely showed up in these rooms. The part that remembered what honesty felt like. Nothing in her voice had been polished or practiced. She hadn't tried to impress him. She'd simply told the truth. A truth most adults tried to hide behind big words and fake smiles. "I've interviewed a lot of people today," he said finally, leaning forward, voice low. "All of them walked in with credentials and rehearsed confidence, but none of them said anything that felt real." His eyes rested on her. "You just did." Zuri looked up, unsure, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of her sweater. Julius nodded slowly. "If someone like you can speak of your mother like that," he said, "then I already know the kind of person she is. Kids don't lie about this kind of thing. They just say what they know. She gave a small, hopeful smile. He stood then, quietly, walked over to a side drawer, opened it, and took out a sealed envelope. He walked back and crouched beside her chair, handing it to her with care. "Give this to your mom," he said, "for medicine, for food, for whatever she needs right now. It's not everything, but it's something." Zuri held it with both hands, nodding, her eyes bright. He rose and gestured to one of the nearby staff, a quiet security officer who had been watching from a respectful distance. "Please take her home. Make sure she gets there safely." The man nodded without a word. Julius turned back to Zuri. "You did something today that most grown-ups don't have the courage to do. You showed up for someone you love, and you reminded me of what matters." He gave a faint smile, one that almost surprised himself. "You're every parent's dream, Zuri. Don't ever forget that." She stood holding the envelope close to her chest and followed the security guard gently out of the room. When Julius returned to his office, he didn't speak to anyone. He didn't answer his phone. He simply sat, the folder open in front of him, sunlight trailing across the floor from the tall windows. Ayanna Brooks. The name was typed clearly at the top of the page. No university degree listed, only 2 semesters completed at Northfield City College. She'd started strong, honors in her first year, student group leadership, excellent remarks from professors. Then the record stopped. No graduation date, just a blank space. And then came the jobs: street cleaner, housekeeper, part-time cashier, janitorial staff, courier. All the roles that got ignored on glossy resumes. But each one was real, documented, with dates, contacts, references, the kind of paper trail that didn't shout, but proved something quietly. Julius sat back in his chair, tapping the folder lightly. He'd spent years building Wellington and Meyer on systems, precision, and credentials. But this was something else. This was someone who had worked not for applause, but for survival, for dignity, for a child. And if a little girl could speak of her mother with that kind of reverence, there was no better proof of character. He reached for the intercom. "Yes, Mr. Langston," came the receptionist's voice. He spoke plainly. "Please get in touch with Ayanna Brooks. Let her know we'd like to meet her again for a formal interview when she's well enough to come." A short pause, then, "Yes, sir. Right away." Under the faded shade cast by the front of their building, Floresa stood barefoot, sorting through a small plastic bag of medicine she'd managed to get from the local chemist down the street. Inside the apartment, Ayanna lay wrapped in a worn wrapper, her skin still hot with fever, while Floresa hovered nearby, fanning her slowly. The air smelled faintly of menthol and exhaustion. They were both speaking in hushed tones, worried but assuming Zuri had gone next door to play with her little friend, Ivory, the neighbor's daughter she often spent time with. It wasn't unusual. Zuri was quiet and responsible, and right now, with Ayanna down and barely able to speak that morning, nobody had expected much else. That was until they heard the sound of a car pulling up in front of the house. Unfamiliar, dark-tinted, with a logo stickered neatly on the windshield. Floresa paused, squinting toward the door. Before she could react, Zuri stepped out, holding a brown envelope tightly against her chest, her small sweater sleeves still rolled over her fists. Floresa rushed to the doorway, eyes wide. "Zuri, where are you coming from?" Zuri didn't answer immediately. She walked past her gently, eyes steady, and handed over the envelope. "It's for Mama," she said softly. "They said she should go to the hospital." Floresa looked at her in confusion, then down at the envelope. She opened it slowly, finding crisp bills tucked inside. Her brows pulled together. "Who gave you this?" Zuri finally looked up. "The man at the company, the one Mama was supposed to see today. I gave him the paper. I told him she couldn't come." Just then, Ayanna's old phone, propped on the small plastic stool near the mattress, began to ring. Startled, Floresa picked it up. The caller ID flashed. "Wellington and Meyer Corporation." She quickly answered, glancing over at Zuri and then toward Ayanna, who was beginning to stir. "Hello," Floresa said, pressing the phone to her ear. "Hi, this is Charlotte from Wellington and Meyer Corporate," a warm voice replied. "We're calling for Ms. Ayanna Brooks." "She's here," Floresa said. "She's not feeling well, but she's awake." "Please let her know," Charlotte continued, that Mr. Julius Langston was very impressed by the message delivered earlier today. He would like to meet with her, formally, when she's feeling better. Florissa froze. She glanced over at Zuri, who stood near the doorway quietly, her arms still wrapped around herself. There was a long silence. Ayanna, now awake but dazed, shifted under the wrapper. Her eyes filled slowly as she watched her daughter from across the room, quiet, calm, still holding on to the hem of her sweater. I don't understand, she whispered. You don't have to right now, Florissa said gently. Just rest. You'll understand soon enough. And Zuri, standing there, said nothing more. She had done what she set out to do, and now the woman she loved most in the world had been seen. The morning came too soon. Ayanna hadn't fully recovered, but she was better than the night before. Less feverish, though still weak in the joints. Florissa had been up since dawn, ironing the navy blue blouse they'd finally agreed on the night before. The skirt was borrowed from her neighbor down the hall, just clean enough and pressed flat under an old hardcover book. They'd pulled pieces together, lip balm, a pair of simple earrings, and a comb for Ayanna's thick curls, now pulled into a neat bun. Zuri stood at the door, arms folded, watching her mother move slowly, carefully. Her voice broke the quiet. Mom, you're the best person I know. Don't be scared. You've got this. Ayanna turned and smiled, eyes stinging. Thank you, baby. By the time she arrived at the sleek glass doors of Wellington and Meyer, the nerves had begun to settle in her chest like stones. She held her bag close, the resume folder tucked inside again, not because they needed it, but because she did. It grounded her. She stepped in, heart thumping, trying not to limp or let the ache in her muscles show. Clara at the front desk looked up from her phone with a smirk curling at the edge of her lip. Well, she said, standing slowly. So you're the one who sent her child to take her place. Her tone was sharp, eyes unapologetically judgmental. Not exactly professional. Using a little girl to occupy a job interview? That's a new one. Ayanna blinked, surprised, then drew in a steady breath. I didn't send my child to take my place, she said calmly, voice firmer than she felt. She did what she believed was right, out of love. You might not understand what that means. To care about someone so deeply, you'd walk across the city for them. Clara scoffed and rolled her eyes. Well, he's not even around. He's in a meeting. Just then, a voice from behind the security desk called out, Excuse me, are you Ms. Ayanna Brooks? Ayanna turned quickly. A woman with soft curls and a welcoming smile was walking toward her. It was Charlotte. Yes, Ayanna answered quickly, trying to steady her hands. He's expecting you. Come with me. We've been waiting. As they walked down the quiet corridor, Ayanna could feel her knees weakening again. But this time it wasn't the fever. It was the weight of everything happening at once. She had barely processed how fast things were moving. Every step closer to the top floor felt surreal. When the elevator doors opened, Charlotte led her into a wide, sunlit space filled with glass and calm elegance. The city stretched in every direction behind tall windows, but Ayanna barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the tall figure standing near the window, Julius Langston. He hadn't heard her enter. His back was to her, hands clasped behind him, the morning light outlining his suit and posture in sharp detail. She cleared her throat gently. Good morning, she said. Julius turned, and the lines around his face softened. Miss Brooks, he said with quiet warmth, thank you for coming. Ayanna stepped closer, clutching her bag, her voice low. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm truly sorry about yesterday. I should have been here. He raised his hand slightly. Please, you don't owe me an apology, he said. Your daughter did what she believed was necessary, and if I may say, she carried herself with more poise than most adults I've met. Ayanna lowered her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. He nodded toward the chair across from his desk. Are you feeling better today? I am, she replied softly, taking the seat. Not completely, but well enough to show up. Good, he said. That's all I ask. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Julius glanced toward her file already open beside him on the desk. But instead of looking at it again, he looked at her, and something in his expression made Ayanna sit just a little straighter. He said, Let's talk. Julius tapped the folder gently with his fingers, then looked up at her, something thoughtful sitting behind his eyes. "You know," he began, voice calm but deliberate, "on a normal day, I don't tolerate reschedules, and I certainly don't entertain anyone sending a stand-in for a job interview." His tone wasn't harsh. It was honest, grounded. "I've built this company from the ground up. I've had to make decisions that leave no room for excuses, no shortcuts, no pity." Ayanna sat still, listening closely. "I've read more resumes than I can count, most of them dressed up in pretense and polished exaggeration. I've sat through interviews where people tried to sell a version of themselves they thought I wanted to see." He paused and then added, "But your daughter, she told me the truth. Not just about you, but about what matters." He gave the folder a light push forward, as if it held something more than paper. "For a girl as young as Zuri to speak about you the way she did, clear, honest, without rehearsed lines or flattery, it told me everything I needed to know. This company needs people like that. People with heart, people with fight. Not for show, but for real." Ayanna lowered her gaze for a moment, overwhelmed, a quiet breath shaking through her. Julius continued, voice softening, "I'm not giving you this role out of sympathy. I don't do that. I'm giving it to you because someone who knows you deeply stood up for you without hesitation. And that says more than any degree or title ever could." He smiled slightly then, something rare and easy. "I'm proud of you, of the kind of mother you are, and I'd like to give you the chance to show us what Zuri already sees." A small laugh escaped Ayanna, part relief, part disbelief. "Sounds like Zuri's my partner now," Julius said, lightening the mood. "I might have to keep her on speed dial." Ayanna smiled, cheeks warm. "She'd love that." He stood and gestured toward the door. "Come, I want to introduce you to someone." They walked down the hall to a corner office, where a woman in a blazer sat arranging printouts. "This is Tasha Monroe," Julius said. "She's one of our senior project managers. She'll be guiding you for the first few weeks. Training, workflow, team systems. Don't hesitate to ask her anything." Tasha gave a warm nod. "I've already cleared my afternoon. We'll ease in." Ayanna felt her palms sweat slightly as she followed Tasha back toward the department. The workspace was sleek, unfamiliar. Open-plan desks, subtle hum of productivity in the air. But she held her head up. Her skirt was borrowed, her bag old, but her mind was alert. And when she sat at the desk assigned to her, she found she still remembered things. Layouts, formatting shortcuts, spreadsheet logic. She wasn't lost. She hadn't graduated, but school had never really left her. Tasha was patient. She explained things, let Ayanna shadow her during calls, shared presentation files and task breakdowns. Ayanna took notes, every line carefully structured, and asked questions only when she couldn't figure things out herself. In team meetings, when someone asked for input, Ayanna spoke softly at first, but with clarity. Her ideas made sense. She spotted small details others missed, and slowly, people began turning to her, not just to help, but to lead small parts. And through it all, Julius never hovered, never made her feel watched, but he paid attention. He'd lean forward slightly when her name came up. Ask how she handled a client edit, whether her presentation outline had been used, whether she adjusted quickly to the new scheduling system. He didn't hand her anything. He just gave her room to prove what was already there. Zuri had fallen ill 2 days earlier, and Ayanna had been spiraling since. The fever had come quickly, sharp and unrelenting, and though Florissa had taken Zuri home to monitor her, Ayanna's mind never left her child's side, not even for a second. Still, she showed up at work. She didn't know how not to. She sat at her desk, responding to emails, reviewing documents, even smiling faintly during team check-ins. But every few minutes, she stepped out to call Florissa, asking, "Has she eaten? Did she take the second dose? Is she sleeping at all?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes gave her away. She moved like someone trying to function underwater. She'd walk into meetings late by a minute or two, nod at things she barely heard, and scribble on her notepad without focus. Julius noticed it. He noticed everything. He watched her eyes wander during a briefing, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Her distracted silence when usually she contributed something thoughtful. After one meeting, as the others filed out, he called her gently. "Ayanna, wait a second." She paused, turned. He closed the door halfway behind the last assistant and looked at her. "What's going on? You're not yourself today." She hesitated. "It's Zuri. She's sick." "I didn't want to bring it up." He raised a hand. "Number?" "You should have." "I left her with Floresa, but I can't stop thinking about her. Her temperature was still high this morning." Julius leaned against the desk. "Then go. Right now." She blinked. "I can't." "You can," he said plainly. "And you should." She shook her head slowly. Something tight in her throat. Julius exhaled, quiet for a second. "Family's not something you put second. Go take care of her. We'll still be here." Reluctantly, Ayanna nodded. She left the building with her heart pounding, not from fear but gratitude. And when Zuri recovered days later, smiling again, eating again, Ayanna returned to the office with fire in her chest. She worked harder than anyone expected. She came in early, stayed late, skipped lunch, took files home, sometimes forgetting to eat until midnight. She wasn't just working, she was repaying something invisible. One evening, long after the office had gone quiet and the glass halls echoed only with city light, Julius returned from a late client call and spotted her at her desk, alone, typing. Her screen lit up her face, weary but determined. "You're still here?" he asked, walking toward her. She jumped slightly, startled, then nodded. "Just finishing a report from earlier. Didn't want to leave anything hanging." "You've got 3 days until that's due," he said. "No need to chase time that hard." "I know," she said, "but I don't like leaving things hanging. I've lived most of my life trying to catch up. I guess I don't know how to rest when something's incomplete." He leaned against the desk, folding his arms. "You really don't know how to slow down, do you?" She let out a quiet laugh. "It's not that I can't. I'm just not used to anyone telling me it's okay." A silence hung between them for a moment, not awkward, just full. Then Julius asked gently, "What's your story, Ayanna?" She hesitated, then let the words come. "I was in school, marketing. I loved it. I was good at it. Then I got pregnant. The father walked away. My parents, my mother's a deaconess, my dad a retired military officer, they said I had embarrassed them. My mother was aiming for a leadership position in church, and I was a stain on her record. She told me to abort the baby or leave her house." Julius didn't flinch, but his gaze held hers. "I chose to leave. I couldn't give up Zuri, so I packed what I had, moved here, and started from zero. No degree, no job. I've worked everything from street sweeping to cleaning toilets. It hasn't been pretty, but I kept her safe, and she's the one thing I've done right." He stared at her for a long second, then nodded slowly. "What you've done, people would have used it as an excuse to stay stuck, but you turned it into purpose, and you raised a daughter who walked into my building and spoke about you like you were made of gold." Ayanna blinked back emotion. He straightened. "Go home. Get some rest. I want to see you tomorrow. Not tired, not drained, just you." She smiled faintly. "Thank you." He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, she called softly after him. "Julius?" He stopped, looked back. "What's your story?" she asked. "You walk like a man who spent his whole life guarding himself. Like you're scared if someone gets too close, they might drop what you've spent years holding together." Julius's eyes stayed on her. He breathed out, slow, deep. Julius went quiet. He let out a breath through his nose, heavy and slow. His tone changed, not colder, just more careful. "My mother raised me alone. I never met my father. When she got sick, she wrote a will, left everything she had to her sisters. She thought they'd care for me, thought family would step in." He paused, jaw tight. "But after she died, they took everything, sold her jewelry, split the money, then told me they couldn't raise someone else's child." Ayanna's brows furrowed, her heart twisting in her chest. "I was 14. I ended up on the streets, did everything, washed cars, packed boxes at night markets, sold cheap belts in traffic. I ate from waste bins some days, slept under bridges on others." He swallowed, eyes distant now. "The day I stopped asking for help was the day I decided no one could be trusted. Not after being thrown out by people who promised to love you." Ayanna didn't say a word. She just sat still, watching him not as a CEO, not as a polished man in a fitted suit, but as someone broken once too, stitched up with silence and control. Julius shrugged faintly. That's why I walk the way I do, why I speak the way I do. Life wasn't gentle, so I learned not to let anyone too close. If they can't come close, they can't hurt you. Ayanna nodded slowly, her throat tight. So you live guarded? I live prepared, he replied, but meeting people like you, and Zuri, makes me question if surviving should still be my only goal. They sat in silence again. No masks, no office roles, just two people who had been abandoned in different ways, somehow still standing. And in that moment, the walls didn't shatter. They just lowered enough for two people to see each other clearly. Ayanna was changing, not just in her work, but in the way she carried herself. Her pace quickened, her eyes were sharper, her confidence steadier. The once quiet assistant who used to second-guess her every move was now the one others looked to when things needed fixing. At the same time, Zuri had found a soft spot in someone else's world. Julius didn't try too hard with her, he just saw her. Every time he stopped by her desk, he came with a small surprise tucked under his arm. A pack of crayons, a tiny storybook, a box of cereal with her name on it. This is for Zuri, he would say casually, and Ayanna would smile, not knowing how to respond. It had been years since she felt this. Whatever it was, she couldn't name it, but it felt like warmth returning to a room she thought would stay cold forever. Julius would call some nights, late enough that the world was quiet, but not so late it felt wrong. Just checking on Zuri, he'd say, and before she could speak, he and Zuri would already be talking. About her school, the friend who shared her lunch today, her teacher's funny shoes. Ayanna would sit on the edge of the bed, folding Zuri's clothes for the next day, listening, watching, heart aching in ways she didn't quite understand. She turned off the lamp beside her bed, listening to Zuri's breathing across the room. And for the first time in a long time, Ayanna closed her eyes with something close to peace, curling softly in her chest. It was one of those quiet Saturday evenings where nothing needed to be said, yet everything felt right. The small living room was filled with the soft glow of the TV screen, but neither Ayanna nor Zuri was really watching. Ayanna folded laundry on the couch, humming low under her breath. Zuri sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through her coloring book, every now and then tossing out random, curious questions the way kids often do. "Mommy," Zuri said without looking up, "what if Uncle Julius gets married to you?" Ayanna paused mid-fold, one sock still balled up in her hand. "What did you say?" she asked, laughing nervously. Zuri finally looked up. "I said, what if he marries you? He's nice. You're nice. Two nice people should get married and make the world a better place." Ayanna blinked at her daughter, unsure whether to laugh or scold. "Zuri," she said slowly, shaking her head, "where did you even get that idea?" Zuri shrugged. "I just thought about it. You smile when he calls. And when you talk about work, your face lights up. And he always asks about me. Even when you don't want me to know, I know." Ayanna dropped the socks and sat beside her. "Uncle Julius is just my boss, sweetheart. A very good man, yes, and a kind family friend. But that's all." Zuri tilted her head. "So you don't like him?" "I didn't say that," Ayanna said too quickly, then softer. "It's not that simple." "But Mommy," Zuri whispered with all the seriousness a child could muster, "you both look happier when you're together. I can tell." Ayanna gave a small, stunned laugh and pulled Zuri close. "You are too smart for your age." "I know," Zuri grinned proudly, "but don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Yet." Ayanna chuckled, her heart thudding with a strange mix of nerves and something unspoken, as she looked down at Zuri's face, so hopeful, so certain. She wondered if maybe, just maybe, her little girl had seen something she herself had been too afraid to admit.